On the surface, Plainfield, Wisconsin is the kind of place storybooks were written about: quiet streets, neighbors who nodded politely, small shops filled with regular faces, and farmland stretching so far that sunrise looked like it was born out of the soil itself. But tucked deep within those fields, surrounded by acres of isolation and miles of silence, stood a weathered farmhouse that hid something far darker than anyone in Plainfield was prepared to imagine, a place where nightmares were crafted not through imagination, but through hands, through obsession, through grief twisted into madness. This is not the story of Hollywood's monsters. This is the story behind them, a story of a small, soft-spoken farmer who would change horror forever, a man whose crimes would inspire films like Psycho, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and The Silence of the Lambs. This is the full, unsettling story of Ed Gein, also known as the Butcher of Plainfield. But before the horrors, before the crimes, before the mask, there was simply a boy named Edward Theodore Gein, and like all monsters, he didn't begin as one. Ed Gein was born on August 27, 1906, in La Crosse, Wisconsin, into a family that hid its own shadows. His father, George, was a man crushed by failure and alcoholic who drifted between odd jobs, unable to escape the fact that he was controlled by a stronger force inside the home. That force was Augusta Gein, Ed's mother. And make no mistake, Augusta wasn't just the head of the household, she was the architect of Ed's entire world. Augusta was a strict Lutheran woman who believed the world was soaked in evil. She preached daily about sin, lust, depravity, and God's punishment. She believed women were the root of immorality and the reason men fell into corruption. She saw herself as the exception, pure, holy, the only righteous woman in a wicked world to protect her children. She isolated them, no friends, no after-school activities, no visitors. Just chores, Bible readings, and Augusta's booming voice reminding them that the world outside their farmhouse was poisoned. They eventually moved to Plainfield, settling on a 195-acre farm, remote, barren, and unseen for Ed. This isolation wasn't just his environment, it became his identity. He grew up without social interaction, without understanding relationships, without knowing how to communicate with the outside world. He adored his mother, worshipped her, believed every word she spoke, and that devotion, twisted as it was, would become the foundation for everything he eventually became. Ed wasn't alone on the farm. He had an older brother, Henry Gein. Henry was different, practical, realistic, and quietly resistant to Augusta's overbearing teachings. As they grew older, Henry began questioning Augusta's worldview. He challenged her beliefs. He encouraged Ed to see beyond her control. To Augusta, this was a betrayal. To Ed, it was something worse. Their father's death in 1940 left the two brothers working side by side, supporting their mother, managing the farm. But beneath the surface, tension simmered. Henry saw the danger in Augusta's influence on Ed. He tried to pull Ed back into reality. He tried to separate him from their mother's grip. And then on May 16, 1944 came the fire. The brothers were burning brush on the property. Winds picked up, flames grew wild, and smoke swallowed the field. Ed later claimed they became separated in the chaos, but his story never quite made sense. Firefighters arrived. Ed calmly led them toward a remote area, and there they found Henry's body. Oddly, he was lying on ground barely touched by fire, stranger still. He had bruises on his head. No autopsy was performed. No foul play was investigated. The death was labeled an accident, but for many, the truth behind Henry's death died that same day. With Henry gone, Augusta had only one loyal follower left, Ed, and now he had her all to himself. In 1945, a year after Henry's death, Augusta suffered her first stroke. Ed was devoted. He cared for her around the clock, cooking for her, feeding her, bathing her like a servant tending to a queen. But Augusta was no longer the powerful matriarch she once was. She weakened rapidly, her health collapsing. Her second stroke, triggered after witnessing a violent argument between a neighbor couple, ended her life on December 29, 1945, when Augusta died. Ed Gein's world didn't just collapse, it disintegrated. His mother wasn't just a parent, she was his religion, his moral compass, his only friend, his reason to exist. Without her presence, Ed didn't just lose guidance, he lost reality. After the funeral, Ed locked away her bedroom, sealing it like a shrine. Dust settled, curtains remained untouched. Her Bible lay open beside the bed. Meanwhile, the rest of the house decayed like Ed's mind. He began sliding into something unrecognizable. Loneliness became obsession, silence became madness, and grief became a doorway. To horror, the years after Augusta's death were filled with something dark, a slow transformation that no one noticed. Ed remained quiet, polite, helpful around town. People described him as odd but harmless, but inside the house, something was happening. Ed began reading books on anatomy, embalming, Nazi experiments, cannibal tribes, head-shrinking rituals, and grave robbing. These weren't curiosities, they were instructions. He started visiting local cemeteries, often late at night, often alone. He later claimed he sometimes felt as if he were in a trance, almost guided by an invisible force. He sought graves of women who resembled his mother, middle-aged, stout, strong. He dug into the earth. Augusta hated. One night she simply vanished. The tavern was empty, a pool of blood on the floor. Locals joked that Ed, who often mentioned Mary's disappearance, might have her hidden at home. He even said, "Mary's not missing. She's at my place." People laughed. Ed always said strange things, but Mary was at Ed's place, her face tanned like leather. Found later in a paper bag. Bernice Worden, 1957. On November 16, 1957, Bernice Worden's hardware store was quiet. Snow fell softly outside. Her son returned that afternoon and noticed something wrong. The store was unlocked. Blood led across the floor. The last receipt printed showed one name, Ed Gein, police. Headed straight to the Gein farm. What they found would forever change true crime history. The Gein farmhouse was dark when police arrived, cold, still, silent. Officers pried open the door, and hell revealed itself. Hanging from the rafters was Bernice Worden's body, decapitated, gutted like a deer, the torso split open. It was an act of someone who knew the anatomy of animals and used it on humans. Then they saw the rest. Everywhere they looked, masks made of human skin, chairs upholstered with human flesh, a corset made from a woman's torso, skulls used as bowls, organs stored in jars, lips sewn on to string, a belt decorated with nipples, lampshades made of skin, boxes filled with preserved faces, and in a bag, Bernice Worden's face, carefully removed. Some officers fainted, others ran outside and vomited. No one had seen anything like it. This wasn't a murder scene, it was a museum, a grotesque sanctuary built from death, and in the center of it all sat Ed Gein, calm, quiet, soft-spoken, as if none of it was wrong. During questioning, Ed confessed to everything with unsettling calmness. He described grave robbing like it was a hobby. He explained removing faces as if it were sewing a shirt. He spoke about wearing human skin to feel close to his mother. He admitted to 2 murders. He hinted at more. He never expressed guilt. To Ed, he wasn't doing evil. He believed he was performing rituals, acts of devotion, attempts to resurrect or emulate his mother. Psychiatrists diagnosed him with schizophrenia, necrophilia tendencies, severe personality disorder, psychosis, sexual confusion, identity disorder. He was declared insane and committed for life. He lived his remaining decades quietly in mental institutions, gardening, reading, and chatting politely with hospital staff. He died in 1984 from cancer. At his funeral, onlookers saw something chilling. People chipped pieces off his tombstone as souvenirs, before it was eventually stolen, even in death. Ed Gein drew darkness. Hollywood would turn Ed Gein into icons, Norman Bates, Leatherface, Buffalo Bill. But the truth is far simpler and far more terrifying. Ed Gein wasn't a chainsaw-wielding monster or a Hollywood ghoul. He wasn't supernatural or brilliant or theatrical. He was a quiet, lonely man who lived in plain sight. A man shaped by isolation, abuse, obsession, and grief. A man who snapped inward rather than outward. A man whose horrors grew in silence, and that is what makes him so terrifying, because sometimes the most dangerous monsters aren't the ones hiding in the shadows. Sometimes they're the ones living next door, the ones who smile politely, the ones no one ever suspects. Ed Gein was not a myth. He was real. He lived. He breathed. He walked among the people of Plainfield, and the horrors he left behind will echo forever.